In the next couple of videos, I'm going to focus on some of the most popular Scottish female writers, short fiction writers. Um, First of all, I'm going to mention Alice Smith. She is a person who is an, diverse literary and intellectual circles in Scotland and elsewhere, usually regarded as one of the most potent candidates for the Nobel Prize in Literature, if it ever comes to Scotland. So she is unofficially seen as one of the Scottish candidates for the Nobel Prize in Literature. She's very productive. She's written a great number of novels, but in this particular case, I'm going to focus on her short story entitled Common. It's a very interesting story, when I started thinking about the story, of course I thought about this broad theoretical framework that I could place the analysis of this story. So the ideas of Pythagoras' teaching were basically my first association for this theoretical framework. So the whole research, my research was focused on the main postulates of Pythagoras' teaching, particularly his notion of philosophy as a single unified system, ethical, poetic, and scientific at once, inspired by a sympathetic, imaginative contemplation of life and inseparable from actual conduct. Pythagoras' theory represents an instance of the primordial conception of being which Bella Humbush described as an awareness that there is only one universal system of rules, one order, which, however strict, never harms life, because it is not a matter of compulsion, but of freedom. Pythagoras' perception of a common assumption, that of cosmic justice, is powerfully rendered in Alice Smith's short story Common. Through the character of Eleanor Fitzgerald, a robust schoolgirl who declares herself a commonist, praises Pythagoras, and quotes from his contemporary disciple Galeano, Smith successfully points to the significance of the tradition of Pythagoras as a sole way of transcending the entrapment of postmodern consumerist system and its imposed harmful disjunctions. So this first part of the research was based on the theory of Pythagoras, his disciples and opponents, and then somehow I tried to focus on the elements of Pythagoras' teaching in this short story by Alice Smith. Also, since this term of commonism is mentioned in the story, I found relevant quotes that explain it. I connected this term with Pythagoras' teaching, and I also used some quotes from Galeano, who is, as I mentioned, a sort of a contemporary, a modern disciple of Pythagoras. So there are many quotes and many ideas of Galeano, particularly his book entitled Upside Down, a primer for the looking glass world, that I found relevant in the analysis of this short story. So I included some of the quotes, some of the insights that Galeano used. in this research, and I'm going to distribute, of course, these quotes and these ideas later to you. This short story is basically deals with two teenage characters that, unlike their parents, their neighbors, their teachers, somehow resist all the coercive ideological strategies of the system they live in. So all these coercive ideological strategies ultimately fail, since these children genuinely refuse to be corrupted by external influences and quite indicatively believe in the interdependence of all living creatures, the way Pythagoras thought. So the main character, Eleanor, basically declares herself a communist. She perceives herself as a follower of Pythagoras, and it is not a coincidence that this whole term of communism is wrongly interpreted in the story. There is this derogative tone. It is equated with communism, right? So a total lack, which depicts basically a total lack of understanding or deeper contemplation about all these issues which these teenagers find really relevant. So this lack of understanding comes on the part of their parents, teachers, neighbors, and so on and so on. So these teenagers represent contemporary remnants of the Pythagorean tradition. Their authenticity is still not corrupted by the pillars of dominant ideology. The studies that I also referred to when I mentioned the corruption of the children and the dominant system of values is the study by Alice Miller entitled Poisonous Pedagogy. And there is this quote, the source, I have the quotation of the source in the reference list at the end of this handout, so you can consult it. So the title of this story, Common, directly alludes to Smith's acknowledgement of the tradition of Pythagoras and its remarkable significance for the present moment. The notion of philosophy as a synthesis of ethical, poetic, and scientific insights governed by the visionary appreciation of all living creatures is successfully rendered in the story through the teenage characters of Eleanor and Louis, who, as I mentioned, refuse to blindly follow the imposed, ideologically molded, authoritative voices of parents and teachers. These teenagers validly expose the ultimately harmful dissociation of sensibility, as Eliot would put it, as the dominant condition of postmodern individuals. Apart from successfully pointing to the reawakening of this tradition as a sole way of transcending the entrapment of postmodern consumerist system and its destructive tendencies, Smith also depicts a powerful image of redemption by the end of the story. Catherine, the mother of one of these teenagers, manages to overcome her addiction to technological gadgets and finally pays attention to Eleanor's and Louis' interests. And it is precisely at this moment that her miraculous transformation takes place. After acknowledging and atoning for her tragic errors, she becomes a fervent supporter of communism and Pythagoras' philosophy. Thus, the story ends in an optimistic note of Gnostic remembrance, a final awakening from the destructive ideological slumber and conscious liberation from its manipulative strategies.